I would first of all like to make a very public apology. This is the single most white male middle-aged panel I've ever had the misfortune to be part of. We have knocked the diversity ball out of the park. I can only apologise. We've scraped the bottom of the barrel to get this mob together. In our defence, we did actually send out over 70 mails trying to get people of all different walks of life, and this is what we ended up with. So, never mind, not to worry. So, I am still John Watts. I'm still the co-founder and managing partner of MDM, and we are here with a selection of folks who are going to help us understand why hybrid business models are such a hot topic at the moment. I have an opening question, which is, why are we talking about this topic at all? And I'm going to start with Jacob. Fire away. Who are you and what do you do, first of all? It sort of says that there, but what do you actually look after at Amy?
That picture could be of someone who's my son. That needs to be changed.
Quite moody.
Sorry?
It's quite moody.
Yeah, right, but that's not what we're here to talk about. No. I'm Jacob Ahlin, and I look after digital distribution for A&E Networks UK, which is a JV between Sky and Hearst. We have a channel portfolio in, I think, 100 countries. And what we're sort of finding in this space is that ultimately the stakes have been so high in just going SVOD and a number of new opportunities is sort of exploring how can we actually get speed to market and get scale by, exploring different models.
And just briefly, why hybrid? Why are we thinking about AVOD plus subscription? Is there something wrong with the AVOD model?
Well, I think that, part of it is that if you only go AVOD, there is obviously the great thing with AVOD is you can get the widest possible audience. Sure. And there's 40% of the population in the UK, or 40% of households in the UK that don't actually want to pay for TV, but you're missing out on the opportunity to actually drive more value out of them. And equally, if you have an SVOD model and you, for instance, want to be competitive of price, then in exploring other ways of monetizing and still be able to keep that low price can also be very helpful.
So it's kind of the best of both worlds.
It is. We don't do it.
No.
We don't do any hybrid models. We have a very clear separation between pay and free. We'll talk about that later.
We'll come back to that. All right, Gary, who are you? What do you do?
Yeah, sure. So I'm the EVP of Strategic Development at All3 Media International. So All3 Media is one of the largest production groups in the UK. We are owned by a combination of Discovery and Liberty Global, both very supportive shareholders. And I guess my role in the business from a distribution perspective is firstly in terms of how we manage our rights across the sort of digital ecosystem, how we're sort of working with our broadcast partners, but also our digital partners. And of course, we have a number of commissions from ITV and Channel 4. So we're very interested in the space in the UK, of course, but my role is more international facing. And alongside that, it's funny, I was looking this morning, but next month it will be 2 years since we launched our first SVOD in the US. So we manage a library of about 10,000 hours of content. And so we're starting to create our own opportunities for that content. Not the front list, we're still very much in the business of selling our content B2B and working with all of the broadcasters. But there comes a point in the programme's life cycle where it's sitting in our library and there's still a real audience for that. So we're creating those opportunities.
And why hybrid now? Why are we having this panel discussion?
I think hybrid's interesting for a number of reasons, but when you're running an SVOD, you are looking very much at your churn. You're looking very much at those sort of free trials and how people bounce out of those. And I think for us, because we market around some very specific titles in specific niche areas, we do find people come in for certain titles and then think, well, maybe I don't want to pay $5.99. So I think there is a barrier to people staying on. And the other point I would make is, when you are marketing to a very specific audience, actually the amount that you're spending per subscriber is quite high. We can get it down to a sensible level, but my question in this space is how many sort of near misses do we have where we would actually capture them if we had a freemium model?
Got you. So it's very similar to as Jacob said. Okay. Steve, you're the most experienced hybrid OTT provider probably in the UK. Why are we talking about this topic now? What makes hybrid so great in your view?
So, hi, I'm Steve Forde. I'm Director of Digital Products at ITV. I look after the ITV Hub, ITV Hub Plus, and also all of our programme apps and websites. But the reason why John's saying I'm the most experienced is that actually Hub Plus has been around since 2013. So we've had a good few years of kind of understanding how it works. For the first 4 years of its life, actually, it was kind of a very small niche product in the corner with quite a small subscriber base. But in 2017, we really invested in it. And the reason why we did that is we still see that, and it was good to see Matthew talking about kind of how robust advertising model is and remains and will continue to be. But we see, a change in viewer behaviours, which has been driven by, again, Matthew was talking about as well, it's been driven by Netflix and Amazon, and the propensity for viewers to want to pay a kind of monthly kind of fee, and also to kind of access content. But also kind of they are learning the behaviour of watching programming without ads, and a small percentage of our audience, a small percentage of our engaged audience on Hub is willing to pay a monthly subscription to kind of to remove the ads, and I think that's the balance that we're striking is keeping that scale of advertising and that scale of viewers who are willing to watch with ads, but giving them a genuine alternative to watch without if they want to. It's kind of it's sort of a sort of shift in their sort of view of what advertising is and how much they value their time.
And I know you don't particularly want to talk about how many subscribers the Hub Plus has. Is it still growing fast? In other words, are you finding that more and more consumers are being drawn to the paid-for, ad-free version?
So I think we've got out in the market last year and said that we're over 265,000 subscribers. Safe to say that we are over 265,000 subscribers. Love Island is certainly helping at the moment. So we do see, across the segments that we kind of have of people coming into Hub, there's Love Island gives us scale, but then all the other programmes like the soaps and the kind of dramas and the kind of stuff that's on all the time brings in a sort of different crowd of people who give you that lifetime value and kind of stay with you for much longer.
You could probably try offering an ad-free version of the ITV Hub without Love Island at an even bigger premium. It's worth trying. I'm only joking. I'm joking purely.
Oh gosh, it's a very, very big audience for us, and you do kind of don't judge it.
No, I know.
John, I know you're a big fan. I know you're.
I am. No, I do.
You asked me for a water bottle the other
glued,
day, so kind of.
Right, Richard, you're in a slightly different position at Channel 4. Tell us about what you're doing with hybridity and why is this interesting?
Sure. Okay, I'm Richard. I'm the head of all 4 at Channel 4, but only for another 6 weeks. So I'm here to dish the dirt. But not while I'm on the stage. So there it is. So Channel 4 just took our equivalent to ITV Hub Plus, or 4 Plus, we thought we'd call it, just for a change. We took that into public beta last week. And so we're in very, very early days. It strikes me a couple of things are going on. One is that perhaps more so than the other obvious comparable broadcasters, but we're moving from catch-up to box sets, and frankly, that's a distinction, isn't it? So we might be perfectly happy to watch yesterday's missed episode of Gogglebox with ads, but we might not want to watch all of Peep Show's 9 series of it with ads. And that's one dimension I think that's interesting. The other, frankly, is the latent demand for video on demand has been so strong that broadcasters have been able to ignore the problem, which is young audiences don't enjoy watching interactive advertising. And they will increasingly seek out content on platforms where there isn't any. As I say, the latent demand for video on demand is so strong that for 10 years roughly, more than 10 years, we've sort of been able to put that in the cupboard and think, well, we know that's a dreadful problem, but growth is happening anyway, so hey, what's not to like? And I think that sort of shoulder of growth is at least coming if it hasn't come yet, and therefore we need to address the audience that perhaps is rejecting interruptive advertising in premium content.
And just briefly, obviously you're moving ahead now with the trial, as you say. Have you done consumer research which suggests there is quite strong demand for an ad-free version?
We have, but the more important research is there's a very strong dissatisfaction with advertising.
Right.
So if I'm really honest, I think the known opportunity is very difficult to predict. We've seen what Steve's prepared to tell us. In the annual report, there's sort of 250,000 people roughly paying for ITV Hub Plus, maybe more than that during Love Island. That doesn't look unattractive. The cost to go to market is relatively low. The incremental numbers of staff you need are not great. Once you're in the market, you're sort of in a reasonable place from an economic perspective. So as long as it's more than none, then it's not a very high risk play. But it might just be that audience that you prize, especially if you're Channel 4, that young audience that you prize above all others is the thing that drives you to say, well, come on, we have to do this, otherwise they're just not going to come.
Okay, we've set the scene. I thought, just to sort of step back a second, it might be useful just to talk a little bit about whether there are inexorable matches between certain types of content and certain types of monetization model. So are there things which only really work as AVOD, which only really work as SVOD? But the more I think about it, I confess, the more confused I get, in the sense that you seem to be able to offer both pretty much everything on any model. I don't know, Steve, do you want to have a sort of crack at this one?
I landed on this in the same place that you did then, which was that there isn't really a one-size-fits-all for kind of each of them. But kind of sport and big shiny floor entertainment shows, of course, get a scaled up audience, and people want to watch them live and all that kind of thing. And all of us VOD providers have a live element to it. But then again, kind of then you look at drama and you look at kind of comedy. They seem to be the places where people are binging, and therefore it's potentially in the more SVOD sort of environment. But for Hub and Hub Plus, because they are catch-up services, we see viewing across the board. I mean, there's no one-size-fits-all. And then you think about sport, there's all the niche products that are coming out, the SVOD niche products that are coming out for sport. So there's not really, I don't think, one-size-fits-all.
I mean, the most obvious rule of thumb, I think, is that if you're an AVOD service below a certain scale, you're going to find it very hard to make serious money. So when you look at some of the very niche content propositions, which have hard to get stuff, it's usually got some exclusivity. Making those work as ad-funded propositions seems very hard to me. I mean, Gary, you obviously license content to quite a lot of different SVOD players, AVOD players, lots of different business models. Yep. Do you ever get approached by people and think, wrong business model, you should be doing it in a different way?
That would be telling, wouldn't it? No, I mean, I think what we're starting to see, certainly as Europe expands in terms of the VOD opportunities, and is sort of a way of segmenting the market, is that it depends who's offering the service. So I think you've got to separate out those sort of broadcaster-driven VOD models because the economics are very different, and you're amortizing that over multiple things. Versus, somebody like me turning up if I turned up with an AVOD platform, what would that look like? And I would expect, an ITV Channel 4 equivalent in Europe to be coming to me with a premium drama available either on my TV screen or on AVOD, and how they window that is up to them. But I wouldn't expect a brand that I don't know, that's just one of many in those boxes or whatever, to suddenly have the biggest premium drama.
It's a great point, I think, isn't it, that the competitive advantages enjoyed by broadcasters do give you a bit more flexibility from a business model point of view, whereas the kind of long tail of niche content providers are probably a bit more focused on pay, unless it's an especially high value, unique audience, I guess. I guess the other feature of this debate we should just spend a little bit of time talking about is the big global SVOD players. So I guess the sort of question I'd love to, again, work my way across the panel is how the roles of people like Netflix spending $12 to $15 billion on content, rolling out with a price point. Actually, I was in the States when Disney Plus was announced, and there was a great deal of concern across a lot of people I was talking to about the $6.99 price point. If Netflix is in a little bit more than that and Disney Plus is $6.99, does this kind of set a ceiling above which other SVODs can't price? I mean, Jakob, I don't know if you have a view on this one.
Well, I mean, yes. I mean, streaming services compete on content, they compete on user experience and on price, and all of the above, benefit from having scale. So, of course, being local or what we call single territory services really struggle to both acquire the rights, getting the scale, and the other parts that I would say is that in terms of the pricing, yes, while we're going through what people call the potential streaming war, if it ever happens, yes, people will be competing on price, but then when you get the content and the user experience right, then Netflix has demonstrated that actually, some of that customer base is actually quite price resilient once you've actually won them over. But yeah, for a period of time, yes, of course, they will be setting the. Do
you think domestic broadcasters in the UK can go in at a higher price?
Just because they're British.
Than Netflix, because they're British, because they have an audience, the brands are known.
But I don't think that people value content because of the origin of the publisher of it.
So BritBox has to be cheaper than Netflix.
Well, maybe people resonate more with the content. Maybe the content is more popular. I don't think so, because obviously it's second-run content. But yeah.
Steve, is Netflix a ceiling above which you cannot price?
I don't think so. I think that kind of you can you look at the BBC as kind of a bit of a subscription channel itself, and kind of at some point that will come out. I think that the value of the content is what the viewer is looking for, and they will pay what is necessary to kind of get hold of it. If you've got a big hit in there, then they will go for it. I think the useful thing for broadcasters and things that are tethered to a broadcaster is that there's multiple windows for them to monetize and get over.
Right.
So therefore, the content, once it makes its way to a kind of subscription service like BritBox will be launched later this year, the cost of that content has been kind of amortized before in kind of different windows.
Right.
So the ability for us to kind of be competitive in the market will be there.
How has the price of the ITV Hub Plus changed in 2013?
The price of the ITV Hub Plus?
Hub Plus.
No, it's remained the same. So it's
been
$3.99. It's been $3.99 for the last 4 years.
Right.
No reason for us to change it at the moment. We look at kind of for people who are incredibly active users in AVOD, and then they transfer over to Hub Plus. Yes, of course, the margin between the two is smaller, but the ones who are kind of lighter users and then transfer over, then the margin is bigger. But it tends to wash its face, at least with kind of some of the big ones. But we do see, significant increases in brand positivity, especially amongst kind of 16 to 24s, actually, in terms of kind of the when you say you've got this opportunity to kind of remove ads, there's a real brand positiveness around it, and also they increase the frequency and they increase the kind of their viewing on it as well once they're paying for it.
We did a lot of market research as to price by looking at how much ITV Hub Plus was and copying it. And that's our starting. And the name. That's our starting position. I think there's a couple of interesting things about price, which is that nobody pays to start with, do you? It's all free.
Yes.
You get your free, 14 days?
7.
7 days, we're 14, although that's obviously a variable that we're testing. So it's all free, in fact. So it's a sort of a weird psychology to it. And I dare say you're all paying for a few things or one or two things. Maybe you occasionally remember that you're doing it. But the truth is that it's not a decision to pay. It's a decision to whether or not to unsubscribe, because you don't pay. You just say, well, I'll pay in the future unless I actively decide to unsubscribe. And I think basically if you're in the middle of something or your kids are into it, which is probably the case for many parents with Netflix or Amazon Prime, which is it's ad-free and kind of you can choose what they're going to watch.
But do you not think you could go in at £3 more expensive than the ITV Hub Plus and it would make any material difference?
Probably wouldn't make a great deal of difference, no. And so probably you're right, that why didn't we? But it's all about testing it out. But
sure.
I just instinctively don't think that prices are particularly...
Yeah, but below a certain level, isn't it? I know I've spoken to an executive at Netflix who talked about the 3 beer theory, which is that as long as the price of Netflix is less than the price of a round of 3 beers, they think churn is manageable.
It's 15 quid in London. Isn't it?
I was about to say, exactly. Watch out, price increases are coming pretty soon.
Isn't there a view that Netflix price hike was deliberately put in place in order to be able to reduce the price when Disney Plus comes out?
There is a theory doing around.
Optics around now the price reduction comes.
I know one of my favourite analysts commented that it shows how worried they are about the competition. In other words, coming in below their price by some distance. I mean, Gary, do you have any thoughts on price? How do we set the prices for these offerings?
I mean, I think the broadcast space is different. I think if you look at the SVOD space as a whole, when we set the price on our niche VOD services...
What are they priced at? Just so
we're at $5.99 in the States.
Right.
And I think, we recognise that, yes, clearly there is a ceiling with Netflix. We're tiny compared to Netflix. They don't even know we exist. Yeah. But from consumer perception, you have that element. But there's also, what are you bringing to it in terms of curation? And I think that applies to any brand. You have a brand that stands for something, and if it's something unique enough, then people will pay for it, just as they paid, our services are largely for hobbyists at the moment. So just as they would have paid for a magazine, they will happily pay $5.99 for our VOD.
You're obviously a JV with Sky. And obviously Sky has to think very carefully about pricing, given the risks of spin down and churn and so on and so forth. What's your thinking about the price point at which SVOD services can roll out?
I mean, we have launched SVOD
course,
services.
and
Yes. So we
Did
last.
Sky have views on the price point that you should charge?
No.
They had
They're a shareholder, and there's a
sleeping
board.
partner.
Yeah, I think that of course, because I think that there's one thing that we have to also
And
accept.
what have you priced that? Sorry, just
So History Play launched last month on Amazon Prime at $3.99, and we launched Crime Investigation Play last week, which is also $3.99. For us, it's actually very similar to, so ultimately if you subscribe to the pay TV channel, then you also get the catch-up, and that we monetize through AVOD, through Sky Media. Once it becomes box sets, we put them on History Play and Crime Investigation Play. What we don't sort of meddle with, as long as it's sort of within the pay value, as long as it sort of meets that content worth paying for threshold, we don't sort of meddle with sort of freemium models. But it's a really good point that the free trial is, of course, as a really big influence on, or have a big impact on lifetime value. I think, something that we probably won't be doing is, I saw, a few of these SVOD channels, giving away them for, 3-month trials.
Right.
Just
at $3.99, that's a tricky.
that is,
And
again.
just you're kind of the eat to Steve's Press a Manger in that you're significantly. You're offering a similar service, but obviously you're significantly cheaper than Steve is. Why did you arrive at $3.99? What was it about the content, the audience, that made you think that was the right price?
Yes, I mean, obviously there were some, we did some testing of it as well, but I mean, going back to sort of the benchmarking exercise, of course, you look at what other people are out there, and it is certainly, it's sort of, we looked at all of the other services that were comparable with it. And of course, it only launched in the UK, we launched it in Germany. And we'll be launching it in other territories on other platforms. So that's the other thing to sort of be mindful as well, is that...
So it's all about, I'm just hearing you're all benchmarking against your peers, essentially. You're copying exactly. He's discounting, but looking at similar channels and price points.
Well, I think that's at this stage, the reality is that 6 months, 12 months from now, that landscape will have changed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. So, let's talk about audiences then. So I guess sort of question probably start with you, Steve. What's your insight into what's really driving take-up from a subscriber point of view into the ITV Hub Plus? How different is the typical ITV Hub Plus subscriber to a general user of the ITV Hub?
They tend to be younger, and they tend to be more female than the Hub overall, although the Hub is much more younger and female than ITV overall.
I mean, that I find really interesting, because there's sort of truism in the pay TV market that younger audiences just don't want to pay, they want everything free.
But we have it's true though, because I mean, you just said that younger audiences are rejecting ads. And we have the likes of Viacom with Pluto TV saying that they're going to focus on the AVOD market. Quibi, which is going to do short form, is again, mobile only, focusing on a younger audience. But actually,
it's a cliche. I think what it really means is they won't buy traditional pay TV in the way perhaps their parents have bought pay TV. But God, so they're younger.
No, they're dipping into different times of the year. If you look at it now, it's incredibly kind of young and female because of Love Island being on. It's kind of
Love Island. I think
Love Island
is
is
a big
driving significant amounts of kind of take up for Hub Plus. But we've also focused on, so Love Island kind of sort of almost takes care of itself. We kind of we tell people, so with Hub Plus, it's not necessarily all about just removing the ads. It's they're also signing up for being able to watch abroad, so they can take Love Island away with them, and also for download as well. So there's a kind of whole host of reasons why people are signing up. So we're looking at kind of different pain points for viewers, and actually adding that into the mix for kind of for this upgrade path. What we're doing is we're focusing a lot of attention on sort of the soaps and the drama fans, because they're the ones who will give us our lifetime value. They're the ones who will give us the kind of the 12, 18, 24 months of kind of subscribing, whereas the Love Island kind of guys are kind of are less than that. Some of them stay for kind of a couple of months, some of them stay for longer.
And there's a key point actually you just made there, is that I think during our conversation earlier you were saying that it's not just the ad-free nature of a product, it's the fact that you have some really compelling features only available
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you go on Twitter of an evening to kind of look at what's going on and what people are talking about, there is a lot of people talking about, is it wrong of me to be signing up for Hub Plus to take Love Island abroad? And there's the resounding no, get on with it. So, and actually that is a kind of, certainly my Twitter feed anyway, but there's a kind of lot of people who are coming in for that. You know, it's the only way to get download of ITV shows as well, so kind of people are signing up for that as well. And we do see a lot of South East sign up as well because of the lot more kind of commuter belt within that.
I mean, Richard, in your thinking at Channel 4, do features like download, to view offline, like overseas travel, have a role in your thinking?
I can't really speak for it, John, to be honest, because it's not going to be my thinking. But yeah, I'll answer it in a slightly different way because it's a question about what you're paying for. And I think it's very easy. I do it myself. I talk about SVOD like it's one great big homogenous group. The truth about, I think, what Steve's offering is the same as ours, which is the same content is the same. It's exactly the same content. You're just paying for the removal of advertising. In your case, you've got a download on your mobile devices. An HD, or is that?
No, not yet.
Right. So, but there's all this sort of peculiar thing. What are you actually paying for? Of course, what I would call is pure SVOD play. You're paying to get to the content. You're paying for Game of Thrones or whatever it is. So, I think we have to think carefully about what the value proposition is, what people are paying for, and why they're paying for it. And certainly, even we might go on to talk about this, as we start to fragment out and go, well, hang on a minute, not only what are you paying for, but how are you paying for it and how frequently and under what terms. And Michael, whose surname I don't know, but he was sitting here earlier on. That was you, Michael, wasn't it? Said an excellent thing, but he said a very interesting thing. I think you were quoting someone else as saying churn is good. Am I right? And I was sitting up there thinking, that sounds mad. But I sort of know what you mean because I think for many people, they're not subscribing at all. They're making a transaction. You must see some of your Love Island I'm going to call them subscribers, are subscribing, as it were, for Love Island and then churning out. They'll come back next year, no doubt. And I think that's, there's a heck of a lot of nuance yet to come, let's be honest. And
we're going to come on to that.
We're in week 1, and all we've said so far is if you want to pay for no ads, go for your life.
I just have one question I just want to ask about this sort of phenomenon. Is there a kind of perverse economic incentive taking place here that we can heavily incentivize people to subscribe by making the ad load so profoundly unbearable? I'm reminded, I had the misfortune to try and call EE, my mobile phone operator, and I was surprised that EE are offering a kind of call version of speedy boarding. But if you get so fed up with waiting, you can pay 50p per minute to actually get through to an operator. And I was thinking, so you've undermanned your call centre, and now you're charging me to actually get to speak to a human. It's insane. But do you see what I'm coming at?
I think we kind of advertising isn't bad. And that's the difference. Everyone's talking about SVOD and kind of like everyone wants to remove the ads and all that kind of stuff. And it's sort of, I'm probably bucking the trend of kind of everyone going, yeah, it is. But when, of course, people, they're used to, with broadcasters, they're used to an advertising kind of based thing. And there's a value trade-off there between kind of free content and advertising. Certainly in Hub, we've spent a lot of time and effort looking at what is the best balance of ad to content ratio. And I think we've got it quite right, actually. We have 2 pre-rolls and 4 mid-rolls, and we do flex up and down on that. At the moment with Love Island, probably will flex down, and in some cases we flex up, but not too far up on that. We've got a good balance of that. We've done lots of testing and trialling to see different ad loads, 0 pre-rolls, like light mid-rolls, and actually the difference in viewing and frequency is really minuscule.
Right.
Now, there is an a kind of brand sort of perspective on it as well, but in terms of we need to pay for the content in some way, and so the advertising is not the enemy of kind of what we're trying to do. It's that the thing we're doing with Hub Plus is it's additive to kind of that balance.
Gary, do you think there's a burgeoning AVOD ad load problem? I mean, when you are licensing content into AVOD players, you're presumably going to have a look at them before you license them?
Yeah, for sure.
Are you sometimes surprised, alarmed, and appalled by the number of ads?
Yeah, I mean, we do see some heavy ad loads. I mean, I think on library it's a little bit harder. But I agree with Steve. In terms of as an industry and overall, we can't afford the vast variety of high quality content we have without the advertising industry. That's just the reality.
Right. Jacob, anything to add? I mean, obviously, you are a hybrid business in the sense that you have ads and you're also charging. There's no ads on your Amazon service.
I mean, there's obviously one major distinction is that we have both pay TV brands and we have our free-to-air brand, Place, which is we're sort of going through a similar journey to yours as it mirror our linear broadcast through catch-up, and whether the decision is then whether we would have a paywall for box sets or whether they would just revert back to history, because ultimately a lot of it is sort of free-to-air premieres but second run of paid TV content. So there's sort of this sort of life cycle of content that, you know, ultimately we start with paid TV and then we're trying to sort of build an audience reach. Whereas, of course, for you, it's starting actually with free content that is fully ad-mounted and now trying to drive additional value, which is actually why the point about, you know, obviously, I mean, the point is that we don't even set the price at all.
Sure.
At Amazon. I just want to make that absolutely clear, because I'm sure you know that's not how it actually works. You know, we give the wholesale price, but we have obviously we have a view of how we sort of competitively wants to be priced, and if we go to direct to consumer, which we're not yet, then obviously we want to establish a price point that we can work with multiple partners. And I think that's one of the very interesting things that's happening right now. Ultimately, is that, you know, with SVOD, you are, you know, we're not setting that price solely. You know, we are constantly having conversations with a number of partners for us to get scale, which we carefully have to navigate through. Whereas, of course, starting with a free proposition, you can name your price as long as they pay for it, right?
So really interesting. Just very quickly talk about the economics of an SVOD service and the hybrid models. I mean, Gary, you've launched a set now,
Yes.
and presumably you had to go through a sort of business planning process,
Yes.
and you had lots of nice finance people doing spreadsheets
Indeed.
and things like that. Tell us a bit about the economics of a service. What does the cost and revenue equation look like for some of the services you've launched?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we're quite fortunate in the way that we come at this, in that if I was, you know, an independent person just wanted to set up an SVOD and do what Roku was saying, you know, anyone can get a Roku app, and that's absolutely right. Well, what I'm fortunate in is I'm part of a group that owns 28 production companies, so we own that IP. So a lot of the cost, I mean, obviously we want to return money to those producers, but a lot of the cost and access in that content we're very privileged with. So that takes a lot of the economics away, because
Sure.
outside of that, I mean, yes, there's tech build, but, you know, I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of people in the room that's got tech off the shelf that I could go and buy tomorrow. It's really a marketing exercise from that.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know, back of an envelope, from a sort of cash flow basis, how many years to break even from launch?
So, I mean, with Inside
Give or take.
Outside, no, I mean, with Inside Outside, we are already in profit. So
Right.
we're 2 years in.
And that's after how many? 2 years?
2 years in. 2 years in next month.
So again, I mean, the point you're making really is that the content costs are the key thing here. You know, there's so many people launching services, it clearly can't be that technically difficult in that throw a rock in the air, you'll hit someone who's launching a service. But equally, the content costs will weigh you down somewhat.
And I think what we're starting to see in our licensing around the front list is that we're having to be a lot more open to the different routes to market that those premium broadcasters have.
Right.
You know, and recognise that all these broadcasters now have a multi-screen strategy, and the days where we could actually segment rights line by line are disappearing. It's probably more sort of time focused in terms of that brand will be with A&E for this period of time. You know,
Should we just do the rights question very quickly? We spoke a bit about this. So historically, it's been the case that production companies would have a set of AVOD rights and a set of SVOD rights, and presumably hybrid business models makes a bit of a bugger's muddle of that model. How are you thinking about rights now in a hybrid environment? Are you trying to get more money off Steve because he's taking subscription rights as well?
I mean, look, I think the conversation with Steve in the UK is a very different conversation, because it's part of the commissioning model, and you know, so we're governed by PAC terms of trade and all that great stuff. I think for rest of world, yeah, absolutely, we're looking at the lines of revenue, but I think we're also being realistic that, you know, you look, there is a general trend. You know, I don't have the numbers here, but you have less and less people watching traditional linear TV as it goes out. You know, they might be time shifting on the sort of hub equivalents. They might be watching it, you know, in a month's time on a plus model. You know, think of a sort of BritBox kind of thing. But we're having to sort of take into account the total value for the broadcaster, how that equates to what they were paying. And okay, yes, if there is overreach, and of course we want to benefit for our producers.
I mean, generally speaking, as a sort of arms dealer to the TV industry, presumably this is a great time to be doing what you do, in the sense that there are more buyers with more revenue lines and more services wanting your content.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, yes, that's absolutely right, in that there's more and more opportunity for content.
Okay.
I think that the flip of that is the more fragmented the audience gets, actually funding that content gets more difficult.
Sorry, Jacob.
No. So obviously, being at the end of actually acquiring the content, when you're in a market which the growth has slowed down or even declining, ultimately we need a broader set of rights to effectively reiterate our products. So. With something like, whether it's a pay or a free channel, ultimately with something like Blaze, which is our free channel, yes, there is a linear channel. There's also a direct-to-consumer app, which is ad funded, and there's also, a partnership with My5 that we're part of, ultimate for us to get scale. And certainly in the pay space, that is becoming more apparent that we just need to do that to actually get any growth.
And just briefly, obviously, because A&E is a big studio broadcaster, you make a lot of content in the US and other markets, and I think I'm right that you sell some of that content to third parties. Is that equation becoming a bit more complex? I think, obviously, when you look at the sort of Netflix, Friends, Warner Media story, there's sort of interesting trade-offs here, because obviously selling programming to big SVOD companies, especially if it's already been made and it's a library, is incredibly profitable, whereas launching an SVOD service is quite high risk and complicated, and you obviously have to pull your rights away, as Disney Plus will be doing.
Yeah.
How did you go about thinking about this?
Well,
you didn't.
No, it's quite interesting. So Richard, who would have been here originally, does that part of the business, and since Disney had to divest their interest in A&E in EMEA, we're actually two separate businesses. So whereas if I was here 6 months ago, we were talking about we being part of A&E International, and it would be similar to when I was at the studios, where you would have the conversation, will you put it on the channel or will you take it to free market? Now we are simply licensing the channel brands and the content brands, and I mean, we are their biggest customer and they're our biggest content provider. But ultimately we don't have the ability to control the content supply the way that Disney have and take it off one platform and put it on another.
And Gary, just quickly before we move on to talk about innovation, is there a trade-off for you? I mean, are you basically putting into your SVOD offerings stuff that you couldn't sell to anybody else?
No, I mean, it's not that straightforward. I mean, look, the inside-outside service is a very British-focused house and garden service.
Right.
So, it's reasonable to say that there's a fair number of those titles that are also on Netflix. In most recent series, we'll have some older series that we can also benefit from, and some other stuff. So, yes and no. Of course, we're creating a home for a library that we manage. But it's not just, the tap that we can't shift.
Did you turn down bidders or people who would have happily bought that content had you not put in?
No, and the way we've got around that is that, we're still a new startup. We're this small pimple on the side of a big sales operation. I'm not going to say to Maria, don't take that offer because I want to do a revenue share here. What we might do sometimes is non-exclusive, depending on what the offer is.
Okay, we've got about 7 minutes left. Let's talk about innovation. Richard, how much scope do you see for innovation in the business models around hybrid offers? We spoke a bit about this the other day. But obviously, at the moment, we kind of have this one price, bit of extra features, ad-free. Yeah. Obviously, it's still relatively early days, apart from for Steve, who's quite old at doing this now.
Yeah.
Do you see lots of scope for over the 2020s for different types of approach, different charging models, different offerings?
Yeah, I do. I'm speaking more as a customer, really, than as a provider. But I do think that the one size fits all, pay $3.99, whatever it is a month, is already being kind of not hacked exactly, but used by customers in different ways. It'd be interesting to see if this is true of you guys. But one of the things I didn't realise, and some of you will, is that of the people who unsubscribe, right? So of the people who unsubscribe, the majority of the people who unsubscribe do it in the same session that they subscribe.
Right.
See what I mean? So the scenario is subscribe, unsubscribe, use your free month. Right?
Right.
Not everybody, I don't want you to think everyone's doing that, but of the people who do unsubscribe, the majority of people who do do that on day one. So it's already kind of a muddle of what we think's happening, what's actually happening. And there are people who are serially abusing.
Yes.
And why shouldn't they? Look,
I mean, it's
why
interesting.
shouldn't
We've been doing a lot of work on sort of Forde analytics
yeah.
and looking at KPIs. And the thing I'm flabbergasted by is still how poorly served some companies are by their analytics providers, because the kind of data you're talking about, being able to analyse that and relate, subscriber numbers to consumption is critical. You can't manage the business otherwise. It's impossible.
It was interesting for us. We didn't have a free trial for a while, and probably why we had such small numbers to begin with. But we saw that a lot more of actually when we introduced the 7-day free trial, we saw a drop in the number of people who were doing the same session, sign up and unsubscribe. And I think simply because they kind of thought, okay, well, I've got the free trial now. At the end of this 7-day period, I'll remember and I will kind of go in and do it. And I think the interesting thing that I've seen from you guys, and it'll be interesting, you're not going to be able to share it, but
I'll tell you anything.
At the end of the kind of the trial, God, I'll try it. At the end of your trial, you're doing a very brand Channel 4 thing of kind of reminding people that the free trial is at the end.
Oh yes.
We trialled a little bit of that and not kind of pushed it forward. It'd be interesting to kind of understand how you feel about that.
Steve, can I ask you, why don't you just do a £25 Love Island season pass?
Yeah.
And then, if people are coming in for that product, and then you presumably would incentivise them to subscribe to the ITV Hub Plus.
I think we won't do a season pass. We'll probably do some kind of annual pass.
Right.
And it probably won't be targeted at Love Island viewers. It'll be targeted at more of the evergreen soap viewers. And we'll probably do some kind of thing around gifting. So being able to gift that annual pass to people. So kind of like have free Coronation Street as a present for somebody. People will want that. And honest. And but with Love Island, I think there's kind of we're still trying to understand the dynamics of kind of when people unsubscribe. So we need to understand how that works before we introduce something that is solely designed just for that one thing.
There's a kind of a knot in there a little bit related to your question about rights, which is that if we get in amongst it, Stephen aren't using SVOD, right? We're not using SVOD rights.
No.
People are paying for a feature which removes the advertising from the AVOD content, right? Yes. So until and unless we're really being honest with each other about what rights are being used where and by whom and for how long and whether exclusively or not, it's only really then when that's all squared off, honestly, that we can then get into, right, okay, now what's right for the customer? And I think passes for box sets is an absolute no-brainer, personally. Right. Come and watch all 9 seasons of Peep Show. It'll cost whatever it needs to cost. That's exactly what people are doing. It's just they're going, I'll get this done in 2 weeks, so I'll subscribe, unsubscribe, binge, and I'm out. It's effectively a season pass.
You want to say something?
No, I mean, the license source, obviously, you would often go to 2 different parts of the business to do that. One of them would be you would license things for a channel. The other part would sort of funnel almost into sort of home entertainment, digital distribution, anything that sort of becomes transactional. And certainly when we license our content, we wouldn't have those, really the opportunity to navigate that without sort of incurring, taking up the rights and start.
Gary, quickly, you license lots of different people. Do you see much innovation in business models across the people you license to?
I think we're seeing a lot of shift in windowing. And I think the question is, notwithstanding UK impact, but internationally, how long is a reasonable period to amortise your investment versus getting into a space where you're a different product, if you like, and a different part of that value chain?
Okay, we've got 2 minutes left, which is time for 2 quick questions. So, we should definitely go to Mr. Gash, and then, I can't quite see anybody, and then one down there. Why don't we go to Bill up there? If we can get a microphone up to him.
Please don't ask about Hungary.
You can subscribe to Hub Plus and watch in Hungary.
There's one there. Right,
good.
Bill?
Okay, am I on? Right. Bill Gash at CSG. So people who don't know who CSG is, we help
No sales pitch, just a question, please.
Engage with customers and build loyalty. Question for the panel. Everything you've been describing is really about a shift in terms of how the consumer wants to have a relationship with you, when they watch their content, what device they watch their content, ultimately how they transact with you, whether they watch it for free and put up with ads, and how they pay for it. What we're really defining is this sort of on my terms or model, right? So a lot of people out there will want to spend time with you, spend money with you potentially as well. And I'm just interested in the level of flexibility that you are prepared to give them to be able to dial up and dial down that relationship. Because I think that's really what's going to work, where a consumer can move between not having to almost fight the system, Richard, to use your description, and sort of, and game it. But actually, you give them the more tools to actually manage the relationship they want to have with you.
Okay, I think we've got the gist.
All right. So my very quick view on that is that we ought to be giving consumers total control over how they choose to conduct their relationship with broadcasters. And another thing is, if people who think they're going to own the customer or want to own something should probably get a dog, because that's not how customers think about broadcasters.
Okay, let's quickly get a question there, sir.
Right. This is aimed at Steve, because you've been running a free service and also a subscriber service for longer, so probably you've got the best understanding and knowledge of this. I am looking to be launching a service in Hungary, and I've been trying to find out how many, what is the split between subscriber and free users. And I've been getting different figures from different people, and I just wondered, this is the horse. The horse's mouth. Could you please tell us what percentage of your viewers become subscribers?
I can't tell you the actual figure, but it's
a
very low single-digit percentage of overall monthly active users of Hub.
Right, I've heard from 2 or 3%, and so that seems to be.
So that's about right.
And
it depends in different months as well. In different months, in some months it might be kind of like in the sort of region you are, and in other months it might be lower.
I see. And as a percentage of revenue.
Well, I think you can work from
Percentage of revenue, you could imagine, in terms of that, it's quite small.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Right, I think we can probably just about do one final word from each of the panellists, and then there's lunch waiting. So very quick question, we'll just work our way along. If you're going to launch a hybrid service, the one thing you've absolutely got to get right is what?
I mean, I would still go that ultimately it's if you need content that people think will reach the benchmark that is worth paying for, if you want to upsell to it.
This may not have been the best question, I'm starting to realise.
I'm going to take that one. I think what you need, content is the obvious one, but you also need upsell paths. You need lots and lots of upsell paths across all of your different kind of places. We had Love Island last year and the year before. We had less upsell paths across each of those things, and actually each time we've added lots and lots of upsell paths and kind of opportunities to tell people that you can get it ad-free. There's a lot more kind of people coming in.
Gary, one thing you've got to get right?
I would agree. It's clarity in terms of what you're paying for. We're looking at those models, and if you're going to get people to pay and move up, what are you actually getting?
Which leaves you, Richard, with the final word of advice. The one thing you've absolutely got to get right, apart from everything that these folks have said.
Well, as Bill would say, let's put the customer in control.
Right. Fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope we have entertained, informed and educated. I believe it's lunch now. A massive thank you to our 4 panellists.